President, my question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. How is the Albanese government ensuring that Australian farmers and producers will continue to be able to feed Australians when the sector is ringing alarm bells of a looming fertilizer shortage?
Thank you, Senator Patterson. Minister Wong.
Thank you. Senator, I spoke earlier in this question time about what the action we are taking in relation to the Middle East crisis. You are correct that fertilizer is one of the supply chains that is affected. It is not the only one, obviously. I know what I can say to you is that Minister Collins has been engaging closely on this. We understand the importance of ensuring farmers continue to produce our food and fibre, and that obviously.
Before we continue, do us a little favour by subscribing to the channel, because over 98% of you watching haven't subscribed. It costs you nothing, not even a penny, to join this channel. Have you subscribed? Thanks so much.
Freight and supply chains remain critical. I'm advised that Australia utilises lower levels of fertilizer than other comparable countries, so we are already efficient users. Much of the input products for the I'm just giving you the advice I've been provided with. I'm happy to. If you don't like it, I'm happy to pass it on. Much of the input products for the upcoming planting season, including the majority of fertiliser required, are already on the water or in the country. Obviously, if the conflict does continue, this supply chain, along with others, will come under more pressure, and the government will continue to work, including with industry, on seeking to ensure our resilience in such a circumstance.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Patterson, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, as fertiliser shortages loom in Australia and the sector is warning us there may be no domestic production, what plan does the Albanese government have to urgently secure urea for our growers and farmers?
Thank you, Senator Patterson. Minister Wong.
This is one of the issues that was the subject of discussion in a number of more than one of my engagements. Obviously, this is one of the areas that globally is under pressure. I think at some 65% of fertiliser-grade urea is sourced from the Middle East, and that currently we are seeing price volatility, as would be expected. Government will keep working to secure supplies, and we obviously recognise this is a global challenge that we are working together to meet.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Patterson, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. How will the Albanese government intervene to secure urea to ensure there is no threat to meat and crop production, as farmers are told fertiliser orders are unlikely to be delivered because of the Middle East conflict?
Thank you, Senator Patterson. Minister Wong.
I understand that ministers, that the National Farmers Federation and fertiliser industry representatives.
Order. Order. Or interjections across the chamber are disorderly. If you want to have a conversation, go outside. Minister Wong, please continue.
I understand that the National Farmers Federation and the fertiliser industry representatives were part of the meeting that Minister Ayres has spoken about earlier this month. We will continue to engage with the industry. Obviously, one of the priorities in the near term, although not immediate, will be to seek to restart domestic urea production. And obviously, Senator Ayres is engaged on that issue, particularly in relation to the Western Australian facility.
If there's one thing that'll get Australians paying attention, it's when farmers start warning that something essential could be running short. Because let's be honest, when people in the city hear the word fertiliser, they might not think much of it. But ask a grain grower in regional New South Wales, a wheat farmer in Western Australia, or a producer in Victoria, and you'll get a very different answer. No fertiliser doesn't just mean a farming problem, it can become a food problem. It can become an economic problem, and before long, it's something every Australian feels at the checkout. That's exactly the backdrop to a fiery exchange in the Senate this week, where Coalition Senator James Paterson challenged Foreign Minister Penny Wong, who was representing the Prime Minister, over Australia's preparedness as global fertilizer supplies come under pressure. Now, before anyone starts picking political teams, let's look at what actually happened. Senator Paterson's opening question went straight to the point. How is the government making sure Australian farmers will continue to have access to the fertilizer they need if international supply chains continue to tighten? It's a question that isn't coming out of nowhere. Global fertilizer markets have faced repeated disruptions over recent years, first through supply chain problems after the COVID-19 pandemic, then because of the war in Ukraine, and now because of renewed instability in the Middle East. Australia imports much of the fertilizer used by farmers, particularly urea, making international developments especially important for local agriculture. Minister Wong acknowledged that fertilizer is one of the supply chains affected by the current international situation. She said the government understood how important reliable supplies are for Australia's food and fibre industries and told the Senate that Agriculture Minister Julie Collins had been working closely with industry representatives. According to Wong, much of the fertiliser required for the upcoming planting season was already either in Australia or on its way. She also said Australia generally uses lower levels of fertiliser than some comparable countries, adding that the government would continue working with industry if international conditions deteriorated further. For the government, the message was one of preparedness. The argument was that while international markets remain volatile, ministers are monitoring the situation closely and staying in regular contact with industry. But Senator Paterson wasn't satisfied. His concern centred on what happens if those global disruptions continue. He pointed to warnings from parts of the agricultural sector that urea supplies could tighten if conflict in the Middle East affects production and shipping for an extended period. He asked what specific steps the government was taking, not simply to monitor the situation, but to secure future supplies for Australian growers. That's where the debate shifted. The government emphasised ongoing engagement with farmers and fertiliser companies. The opposition pressed for more detail on what practical contingency plans were already in place if imports became more difficult. And that's an important distinction. One side focused on current coordination, the other focused on future preparedness. Outside Parliament, this isn't just another political argument. For many farmers, fertiliser is one of the largest input costs in producing crops. Any sustained disruption can affect planting decisions, production costs, and ultimately food prices further down the supply chain. That's why organisations representing farmers have been watching international developments closely, alongside governments and industry. The discussion isn't simply about politics. It's about resilience, it's about supply chains, and it's about how Australia responds when global events place pressure on industries that Australians rely on every day. As the questioning continued, it became clear that neither side intended to shift its position easily. As the questioning moved into its final stage, Senator Paterson sharpened his focus. His second supplementary question wasn't simply about today's fertiliser deliveries. It was about what happens next. What if the disruption continues? What if global shipping routes remain under pressure? And what if Australian growers find themselves competing with the rest of the world for a product that is essential to planting next season's crops? Those were the concerns the opposition wanted front and centre. From its perspective, waiting for markets to stabilise isn't enough if farmers need certainty now. Minister Wong responded by pointing to the government's ongoing engagement with the agricultural sector. She told the Senate that representatives from the National Farmers Federation and the fertiliser industry had already participated in discussions with ministers, and she said those conversations would continue as the situation developed. She also referred to efforts aimed at restarting domestic urea production, including work connected with a facility in Western Australia. For the government, that was evidence that planning was already underway. The message was clear. Officials were talking with industry. They were monitoring global developments, and they were looking at ways to strengthen Australia's longer-term resilience. The opposition, however, argued that engagement alone would not solve the problem if global supplies tightened further. Its position was that farmers wanted practical certainty. They wanted to know where future supplies would come from. They wanted confidence that fertilizer would be available when planting decisions had to be made. And they wanted reassurance that Australia's food production would not be placed at unnecessary risk. That exchange highlighted one of the biggest challenges governments face during international crises. Some problems cannot be solved by one country acting alone. Australia does not control global shipping lanes. It does not determine international commodity prices. And it cannot single-handedly prevent geopolitical conflicts from affecting world markets. What governments can do is work with industry, diversify supply chains where possible, maintain communication with producers, and plan for disruptions before they become emergencies. Exactly how far those plans should go is where political disagreement begins. Outside Parliament, the discussion carries real consequences. For a grain farmer, fertilizer is not an abstract policy issue. It's a major business expense. For a livestock producer, rising feed costs can eventually affect profitability. For transport operators, higher fuel prices flow through operating costs. And for families buying groceries every week, increases anywhere along the supply chain can eventually show up on supermarket shelves. That's why debates like this matter. They're not just exchanges between senators across a chamber. They're discussions about how international events can affect everyday Australians. Regional communities often feel those pressures first. A delayed shipment, an increase in freight costs, a shortage of key agricultural inputs. Those are practical challenges faced by producers long before most consumers notice changes at the checkout. Throughout the exchange, both sides continued framing the issue differently. The coalition argued that the possibility of tighter fertilizer supplies demanded stronger assurances and greater detail about contingency planning. Labour argued that it was already working with industry, monitoring developments closely and preparing for changing international conditions. Neither side shifted significantly from those positions. As is often the case during question time, the debate ended without complete agreement. But the discussion itself highlighted something important. Australia's agriculture sector depends on complex international supply chains. Events taking place thousands of kilometres away can influence prices, availability and production decisions here at home. That reality has become increasingly apparent over recent years through the pandemic, disruptions to global trade, conflicts affecting major exporting regions, and continuing volatility in energy markets. Many agricultural organisations have argued that building resilience will require a combination of reliable imports, stronger domestic production where feasible, efficient transport networks, and ongoing cooperation between governments and industry. Exactly how those goals should be achieved remains a matter of public policy and political debate. As Parliament continues sitting, fertiliser supply is likely to remain one of several issues linked to broader discussions about food security, energy, inflation, and Australia's economic resilience. Whether future global conditions improve or become more difficult, these questions are unlikely to disappear anytime soon. For farmers preparing for future planting seasons, the focus will remain on practical outcomes. Can they obtain the products they need? Will prices remain manageable? Can they plan with confidence? Those are the questions that matter most on the ground. Back in Canberra, the political debate will no doubt continue. The government says it is actively coordinating with industry and preparing for potential challenges. The opposition says it will keep pressing for more detail and stronger assurances. Ultimately, Australians will judge those competing arguments for themselves. One thing is certain, when Parliament debates issues affecting agriculture, it's not only about politics. It's about the people who produce Australia's food, support regional economies, and help keep supermarket shelves stocked across the country. So, what do you reckon? Has enough been done to prepare Australia's agricultural sector for ongoing global supply disruptions, or should governments be taking additional steps to strengthen long-term resilience? Share your thoughts in the comments below, but please keep the discussion respectful. If you enjoyed this breakdown of one of the week's key political debates, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update from Canberra. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.